Hello, calculus fans. All right, we're going to say that two non-zero vectors are perpendicular, or if you want to sound fancy, we'll say orthogonal, if the angle between them is pi over 2. That is, it's a right angle. Now in this case, when we write a dot b, we end up with length of a, length of b, cosine of pi over 2, but that's just 0, because cosine of pi over 2 is 0. Now, on the other hand, if we start with two vectors whose dot product is 0, then cosine of theta has to be 0. And so theta is pi over 2. Now we're going to say that the 0 vector is going to be orthogonal to all vectors, even though it has no direction. So we're going to have a theorem now that says the two vectors, a and b, are orthogonal if and only if a dot b is equal to 0. Now it's important to note that the cosine of theta is positive if we choose an angle theta that's between 0 and pi over 2. And cosine theta is negative if we choose theta to be strictly bigger than pi over 2 but less than or equal to pi. So that means whenever we compute a dot product, we get a positive number when theta is less than pi over 2. And we get a negative dot product for values of theta that are bigger than pi over 2. With this in mind, we're going to think of a dot b as a sort of measure of the extent to which a and b point in the same direction. The dot product a dot b is positive if a and b point in the same general direction, 0 if they're orthogonal, and it's negative if they point in generally opposite directions. Here's the picture that we'll have in mind. A dot b is positive when the two vectors point generally in the same direction. A dot b is 0 when the two vectors are orthogonal. A dot b is negative when the two vectors point in generally opposite directions. Now you can have some extreme cases. What happens if a and b point in exactly the same direction? Then theta is 0, and that means cosine theta is 1. And in that case, a dot b is equal to the length of a times the length of b. What happens if a and b point in exactly opposite directions? So not generally opposite directions, but exactly opposite directions. Then theta is equal to pi, and then we'll get cosine theta is equal to negative 1. And in that case, a dot b is equal to the negative of the length of a times the length of b. Okay, that's all for now.